everybody. Welcome to another episode of AWS She Builds Tech Skills North America. I'm Candace Bohannon, one of your co-hosts on the She Builds team, and today I am joined by Jane Ridge, another solutions architect and member of our core team. So Jane, thanks for being here with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
For sure. Could you take a couple minutes and just introduce yourself? Tell the audience who you are, what you do, and why you decided to be part of She Builds.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jane Ridge, I'm a senior solutions architect. I've been with AWS about 4.5 years. And currently I'm an SA for what we call SMB space, so small, medium business. And I work with customers all over the United States, but primarily out of North Carolina, South Carolina. And I have a background with on-premises environments, but also AWS, so storage, security, AI/ML technology, so the whole gambit. And I got involved with She Builds last year. I did some building with what we call a builder fair, which is kind of like a science fair for grownups that we have at reInvent and Reinforce. And just love the idea of connecting with a group of women who I felt like, we had commonalities about, coming up through the technology space and being able to support each other. It's been awesome.
Good. Yeah. So excited that you've joined. I really like the Builders Fair videos that we do. That was something that me and another teammate kind of came up with. And I didn't interview you, but I did edit your video and piece together like the screen share and your live thing. So I remember the first time you joined one of our team meetings, I was like, hey, I know you.
Yes, the recruiting worked. I came full circle. I was like, let me help you.
Yeah, love it. So great. So happy to have you on the team and just knowing you at AWS. So thanks.
Awesome.
For our audience, if you have any questions, comments as we go along, please feel free to drop them in the chat and we will address those as we can. Today, we're going to be talking about Amazon Q Developer. So I recently became a specialist SA focused on Q Developer about maybe almost 2 months ago. So I've been just learning a whole lot. The onboarding has been really fun, and it's been a lot of hands-on time with Amazon Q Developer. So today, it is a really hot topic, all this coding assistant that we have in the world today and all of the different announcements and things like that. So I thought it'd be fun if we just chatted and kind of talked about Q Developer. So that's what we're going to do today. So I've been playing with it for 2 months, like pretty much daily, 2 months. Jane, I heard you've used it too. Can you tell people a little bit about what you did?
Yeah. So it's been around for a while, but it's more recently. I was getting a lot of interest from my customers, and I was like, how can it help them, and how can it help me? Frankly, do my job more efficiently. And so a few months ago, my team actually we had to get together, and we decided to do a hackathon. And everybody likes it when things are a little competitive, gamified a bit. And so we broke out into teams, and the idea was, can you in an hour come up with an idea of something brand new you want to build it so it's actually functional and you can do a demo and then demonstrate it to the wider team. And thinking through that, like, it was a great challenge just because it's like, okay, can you do that? Like, that's a really short amount of time to do all of that. But we got together, and I would say probably the most difficult part was actually having the idea. It was like, okay, what are we going to build? Sky's the limit. And the team, we decided, hey, something that could be useful would be if we could take things like meeting notes, translate that to the point where you can pull out, like, what are the key action items, what are highlights, lowlights, and then if you could even email that to yourself just to make things more efficient, because we're in meetings all the time. And of course, it's key, like, what are my follow-up items? And so, yeah, we basically typed that into developer queue. It wasn't like you're going to build it with these services or anything. It was just, this is what I'm describing to you in natural language, what I want to build. And within minutes, we had a CloudFormation stack that deployed a demo that I would say is 90% of the way there. We ended up having to do a few tweaks, but the entire team was like, hey, this is really cool. Like, you think about how long it would normally take to develop that and what we were able to accomplish. It was super cool.
That is super cool. It's been really fun for me in this onboarding to do those sorts of things. Like, you have an idea and you can just go implement it. So I don't even know how many applications I've built in the last couple of months. But I'm going to show you some here, or show our viewers some here in a couple of minutes. And we're going to talk through, we're going to show you guys some of these things. We want to show you some demos today. So first, Jane is going to show you, walk through creating an app in just a few minutes, show how quick and easy that is. I'm going to show you a couple of best practices that we have, and then we'll sprinkle in the features and new announcements that we've had. It's been a whirlwind of the month or two. And then we'll actually end it with a recorded demo from one of my friends named Marcilio, who won an internal contest, a Shark Tank type of contest, showcasing one of the new features of Q. So that's what we have in store for you today. And if you are ready, Jane, you can get your screen ready and show a demo.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. So let me go ahead and present out. All right. I'll do my. All right. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, but could you make it just a little bigger? It might just be a me problem, but.
Yeah, let me see if I can. I'm going to do my skills on the fly. If I remember my shortcut keys. There we go. Absolutely. So I'll just preface this by saying, although I took some coding classes back in college many years ago, I won't say how many, I don't necessarily consider myself like a traditional developer. But I think in this day and age, almost everybody needs to have some ability to create code, just because when you think about automation, right, repeatability, what we're building, like, that's just so important. So this has been life-saving for me, as far as like being able to quickly take those ideas and create code and do it in a way that I feel very confident. And I feel like this gets me more the way there. I still have to do maybe, I would say, some additional research and that kind of thing. But at the same time, like, the barrier has been lowered to start getting your ideas out there. So yeah, so starting with, I'll say, when you use Developer Q, it integrates into your IDE. In this case, I'm using my Visual Studio Code project, but it does integrate with several others. I think we have a link, that we just posted about where that goes in. But once you have your IDE, you basically just need the plugin. So in this case, I have my Amazon Q plugin that I've already installed. And I can open up my workspace, I can authenticate to Q, and I can get started. So I'm going to start with, I have Q here. It's going to ask me, do I want to explain, to debug, optimize, things like that. And when you start off, if you go ahead and just do a /, you can see you have a few options here. Basically, you're able to go ahead and, do you want to make changes to an existing project? Do you want to do some testing? Do you want to review for security? Which the security one is great, because you think about AWS security best practices and the fact that you're wanting your project to meet those. So now you can do a review, and not only will it generate security recommendations, it will give you explanations behind those, which is super cool. And then also do things like generate documentation. But I'm going to start out, and just from the very get-go, we've been talking about the idea of, we want to create a project. And so I'm going to go ahead and just ask it for a project. So I'm going to say, I'd like to create a chatbot on AWS, utilizes Bedrock, allows me to deploy via CloudFormation. So in this case, I love the fact that it's talking me through sort of step by step. We're going to create the CloudFormation template. We're going to configure Bedrock. We're going to set up an API gateway to handle the requests. And we're going to also create a Lambda function to interact with Bedrock. So it's going to say, okay, we don't see an existing one. Let's create a new project structure for you. And it's going through and it's going to take those pieces. So I'm going to let that finish out. This takes probably, I would say, depending on the complexity of what you've asked it, and as you ask it to tweak potential things, like you can say things, I want it to be resilient within a region. You can call out like specific things that you would like it to create. So it's going to create me a directory structure, but depending on how long that takes, you're going to get something, I would say 5 minutes or less. So it's creating the template. Now, while I wait on that, I'm actually going to show you, I had created this ahead of time just to save some time. So this is an example of where we've actually had the chatbot created beforehand. So let me pull that. Let me pull this over. 1 second. There we go. So, excuse me. All right, so here's a template I created beforehand. It's going to build that out in the background. But in this template, this is an example of a CloudFormation template that I could put in my account. I could go ahead and start to deploy. Now, let's say I wanted to understand a little bit more about what it's actually created here. So once you have Q integrated within your environment, you can do things like highlight pieces of the code, and you can ask Amazon Q to explain it. So let's say I'm not very familiar with IAM roles. And in this case, I've got an IAM role for Lambda function to access Bedrock, but I'd like to understand a little bit more about that. So it is going to come up. It's going to say, okay, this is what you'd like a little bit more information about. It's going to break it down part by part, which I love because you can find all this in the documentation, but I want things handed to me if possible, right? And so going through, it will explain to me about the execution role and information about, why this makes sense. I can certainly ask it specific questions. I can even say like, what are some best practices around IAM roles, for example? And you can make this as specific as you want, or you can ask it kind of overall questions. But I love things like, from a security perspective, it's coming back and telling me, we recommend least privilege, which that sounds correct to me. I certainly want to make sure I'm following things like that. Also talking to me about what managed policies mean, if you're maybe not as familiar with that. So it really is like having that almost person over your shoulder that can say like, let me explain this down and break it down, and you can ask any question you would want.
Yeah, I think that's super powerful, especially when it comes to like the CloudFormation templates, because when you do go to the docs, you're kind of bouncing from page to page. Not to mention you have to leave your IDE to go do that. So it's really convenient. And I often describe Q as just the smartest, most enthusiastic new employee you've ever had. They know everything, but you do need to kind of make sure that you're directing them in the right way. So great example.
I like the enthusiastic helper.
Yeah.
Another thing that not everybody has been aware of, but I've showed some of my customers and they're like, hey, this is super cool. And I agree, because I think it's super cool, is you can come over here and there's this thing called Infrastructure Composer. So a lot of times, like, I'm a visual person, so it helps me to understand a little bit more about an environment to see visualization. So if I come through and I ask it to break down like visually, you can see it builds out the code basically in a visual representation. So in this case, I can see more information about my Lambda function and role. I can see more information about the API gateway and deployment I have. And the nice thing is you can even come in here and export this. So if you're putting together documentation, how many people are like, I don't really have like an architecture diagram of this. Like, you don't have to necessarily start from scratch. You can use something like this, which is really fun. I will say the converse of this, this is another thing that I love to show folks is I've got a sample project, and you can see I don't have anything in it right now. But what I can do, and this is a structure where I can do CloudFormation, I can open this with Infrastructure Composer. And with Infrastructure Composer, you can see I basically have a blank canvas. But let's say you have an idea around, these are the components I know I want to start building. I know there's a relationship. I'm just not really sure kind of how to get that started. So you can start building this just like building blocks. So I could say, I want to take an API gateway, and let's say I want to be able to trigger a Lambda function from there. I can simply drag and drop. I've made a connection, and you can see it's giving me information that I could put in about the Lambda function, about the API gateway. But as I'm doing this, if I go back to what was previously my blank project, you can see it's starting to build the code framework for me, which is so nice, because now I might be like, okay, these are the components I need to start thinking about, but I can also go back to my building blocks of how I'm building them and see how they translate.
Yeah, it's a really nice visual and learning tool. Like you can draw it on a whiteboard and then it kind of helps you build out your CloudFormation, right? Is that what you're showing here? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And even what I have found, like I've had people ask me, look, I have an old CloudFormation stack set I didn't create with Q. And it's like, no, that's fine. You can take this, and now if you would like to create a visual with that, Infrastructure Composer can help you do that. So you kind of have the best of both worlds there.
Nice.
Yeah. Another thing I just wanted to demonstrate too. So if I were to say, within this environment, we talked about being able to do things like I'm explaining what things are within the code. I can also do transformations. So let's say I were to come in here and we'll go here, and I'm going to get out of this chat. So in this case, we've been able to, I've created an environment. So I'm going to go ahead and take one of my projects that I've got. Let's take my chatbot here. And 1 second. Okay. So I'm just trying to clean it up so it's a little easier. So I've got my chatbot template. I can do things like I'm going to ask this. Let's say I don't want it to be with CloudFormation. I want it to be something that gets deployed with Terraform. So you can take an existing project that was written with one framework and actually have it translate that and do it for you. So if I were to ask, can you take project and update it with Terraform instead? And you think about the idea of if you were to take down all the pieces and like rewrite them with Terraform, and I've done things like that, how long it can take. And you can see it's recognizing, okay, I didn't tell it was CloudFormation. I just said, take my project. It recognizes what it is. And you can see it understands the context around Terraform, that I'm going to need a main.tf file, for example. So it understands those components, whereas if I were doing that translation, I would have to remember how to do that. And as it goes along, it will start, it will create them using a format. And then if you don't like that format, you can ask it for different things. So for example, if you want your modules broken out in a different way than what it suggests, you can do that. Like all of this is still customizable, follow things that would be best practices for you. But I love the fact, like you think about, again, the time savings. I think that is the big thing. And just the confidence of being able to automate things, and in a way that I feel like I'm learning as I go too.
Agreed. We got a question in from LinkedIn, and the question is Q Developer targeted more towards the AWS ecosystem, or can it handle other ecosystems and programming languages in general? And so what you just showed there actually is Terraform is not AWS specific, right? That's HashiCorp. But since we have these LLMs under the covers, like behind the scenes, they tend to know a lot about a lot of different types of development. And so we do have like a list of things that we specifically support, but it doesn't have to be in the AWS world specifically. In fact, yesterday I just experimented and said, can you create a Flutter app for me? I was an Android developer 15 plus years ago.
Oh,
I didn't know
wow.
what Flutter was, but it's like the new way of doing, it's more of a framework, and Dart is the language. I learned this on the fly in a meeting. It was great. But Q did fine at that. So it definitely can work outside of the AWS world as well. It works best, I think, inside the AWS world because it does have that deep knowledge of the our services.
I agree. Yeah, I think when you're looking at best practices, things like that, it obviously is going to know a lot about the ecosystem. But yeah, I definitely agree. Like it's not AWS only. I mean, if you want to write Python scripts, I mean, that's not AWS specific, but it can certainly do that. And in fact, when we did the hackathon team challenge, right, we had Python code that was part of our environment that it was able to stand up with that. And I won't necessarily sit here and go through all of the pieces, but you can see it's starting to create those files. If I go in here, it's created me a subdirectory, and you can see it starting to fill that out. So I've got my main TF. And again, like we talked about the IAM role for Lambda. So now that same, being able to deploy that same resource has been translated over. So, and then I can translate and modify from here. So even things like it's picking out which LLM model. I didn't tell it a specific model when I was saying, let's create the chatbot. It picked one. But if I wanted to say, hey, I'd actually like to use Nova instead, I can ask it to do that, and it will come through and make the updates for me.
It's super cool. Very easy to use, time savings. And learning, like you can learn on the fly. Very cool.
Absolutely.
There was another part of that question that came through. It was like it's like a twofer. There was also a question about data security and things like that. And what I would recommend is to check out the pro tier. Dropping that link in here for you right there. But within the pro tier, you do have, the enterprise grade security and things like that. You can always opt out of having some of your information sent out. But within the pro tier, your data is like your data, not used to retrain models and all of those sorts of things. So just wanted to address that one as well. You can get started with a free version using a builder ID, and that has, less usage or whatever overall. And we intend for that to be more of like an experimental, like people getting started with it. And for your production code for your company, definitely would recommend considering the pro tier. And if you are an AWS customer already, you should reach out to your account team to talk with them about how you can get started with that.
Yeah, definitely double click on that. Generally, if I have folks trying it, I'm like, hey, free tier is great, but the limits are much higher when you get a pro tier, and you do have some benefits like the security suggestions, also things like customizations. So you can tie this into like an existing code base. So if you would like suggestions to be based around that, let's say you have like existing practices, things like that within your environment, that's also a neat feature that was introduced, I think last year, if I recall correctly.
I think that's right too. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. But yeah, thank you. I was just, this is sort of the basic pieces. But yeah, if you have any additional questions around that, like, please let me know.
Yeah, drop them in the chat and we'll try to answer them here, or you can follow Jane on LinkedIn. I don't think I posted mine earlier. You can also find me on LinkedIn. You can find most people on LinkedIn these days. Um, I'm also going to show you a little bit of a demo. I want to blah, blah, blah. First, I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to try not to do too many things at one time so that I can get this started. Share this window. Perfect. Okay. So that came through. Let's make it just a little bit bigger. What I want to show you is really kind of building off of, oh, lovely. This is just what I want. It's going to build off of what Jane has already shown you. We have a lot of different ways that you can use Q Developer, and my favorite one actually is using it within the CLI. So that's what I'm going to show you here. You see I have my VS Code open with a little sample app that I created for something else last week. I create these all the time. But I really enjoy using the CLI. So within the terminal, you don't even have to be tied to any IDE specifically. You can just open up a terminal. I am in VS Code right now, but you could use a regular terminal as well. And you just say Q chat. So with this, I'm going to make it just a little bit more space here because I like this intro. It feels like old school, like Atari or something.
I was gonna say that brings back some memories of like Pac-Man or
yeah, Frogger. I don't know. So here is the CLI experience. So within the CLI, we're actually using Claude Sonnet 3.7 under the covers, whereas in the other ways that you can interact with Q Developer, we're invoking Bedrock, which could be pretty much any of the models that we support under Bedrock that are really generating your help, whether that's documentation or code or whatever. So again, I like to use the CLI, and the reason that I like it is because you can just ask it questions, just like Jane showed also. I'm going to ask it about this little demo app. So what does this app do? Just kind of asking it some questions, see how it's going to go through and analyze what's actually happening in these different files. So this is really nice if you are a new person to the team. You just get thrown into a code base and then you have to figure it all out. Now you can go ahead and get a high level overview of what's actually happening here. So this says it's a quote of the day serverless web app that I built up the other day. Tells you some of the AWS services that we're using behind the scenes. And for the demo that I did a couple of weeks ago, I showed a little bit of like development where we use the CLI to implement a like feature. So that's what we did before. It was part of a demonstration, just like you can see right here. So I like to use Q to really help me design up my application. So most of my job really is like demoing Amazon Q. That's what I do a lot now in this new role. And I've also just been building new things a lot. So a thing that I like to do is always to ask it to help me come up with an idea. So we're designing together first. It's like my paired programmer. So I would do something like, so we want to add a new feature to this. So I want to add a new feature, another new feature for a live demo. That's what we're doing right now. Let's say, can you recommend a feature and an implementation plan to implement it? Don't do the work yet though. So this is kind of one of those things where you can, it's almost like going to the whiteboard whenever we were always all together, working together. You could go and say, we've got to come up with something. Users want new functionality in here. What can we give them? So, of course, enthusiastic, smart assistant here. I'd be happy to recommend a new feature for this demo. Here's a suggestion with an implementation plan. So let's add quote categories and tags. That sounds great. And
Mhm.
so then it kind of lays out what are the things that we need to do to the DynamoDB. What do we do on the front end? Which, by the way, I'm not a front end developer. Really don't like JavaScript and things like that. And yet I have a front end on here. I'm not going to show it to you because of reasons. But it created the front end for me. So that was very cool. And then we'll have to do a little data migration, testing, and this is great for a live demo because X, Y, and Z. And so I'm like, great, sounds good. Can you write this up and save it as Markdown? Or just save it. Save a file here to remind us what we're doing.
I love the fact that you are talking to it like it is your, it's your coworker that you're just, having that conversation with.
Yeah, this is the thing I was talking about the other day. I almost always say please and thank you and all of those sorts of things, and I give them like you're doing great, thank you. I don't know why, it just feels right.
Yeah. I mean, I think, if it feels right, it's like, the whole idea is like, it is an extension of the team, really.
It is. I'm gonna show you another thing that I did a little while ago too. That kind of yeah, I'll show you in just one second. Let's talk about this one. So here is our plan. And so here's our quote categories feature plan. And so it's kind of the same thing that he already, Q developer already told us above there. Here's the changes that we need to make, all of these sorts of things. We have a SAM template, all of these. So I'm like, so now he says, does this sound good? And I'm like, yes, it does. Another best practice that I tend to follow is I say yes or no. Here, I rarely will just trust it. It is an enthusiastic helper who wants to give you the answers, but sometimes it might not do exactly what you want it to do. So I like to keep an eye on it. And then if it is trying to do something where I'm like that, why'd you do that? I kind of jump in and I ask, why are you doing that? Explain this command so that I can learn and so that we get exactly what we want out of the end. So there it is, created our document. It's right here. We can see it if I scroll this down a little. So then what I would do, we're not going to go through this today because I have one more thing that I want to show you. What I would do is, see, Q says, would you like to start implementing any of this? Normally I would say, yes, let's do step one. And then we would kind of go through it. And then we have this document right here that we could check into GitHub or pass it on to our other friends or whatever might be, where we can kind of track our progress throughout the time. So I really like using Q for design partner to get things started. So I'm going to say, not right now, we're live. I want to do something else. And the thing that I want to do next, my other kind of, my best practice that I would encourage everyone to do. Let me also show you the banner for it before I get in there. I use project rules. So you can go here to this link and kind of learn more about what they are. I think rules are very, very important to tell Q how you want things done. So I think I have a background as a DevOps engineer. So you think of those like best practices, DevOpsy sort of things. You can set those as rules so that Q does those all the time. So you forget to check your code into GitHub or GitLab or whatever version control system you use. You can tell Q to do that for you every time. You don't like writing test cases? Cool. Make that a rule. And every time you update or add functionality, Q will write those unit tests for you. So those are some that I typically have. I also like to make sure that Q knows that it can ask me questions. So another rule that I typically use is if I'm ambiguous or there's multiple ways to do something, please ask questions, explain why you picked what you picked, and things kind of like that. So we're gonna talk. I want to make a rules file. So you follow best practices. what should we add to that? So I already said a few, but we'll see what Q comes up with to show as well. Oh, this is going to be a comprehensive rules file. I've asked him to do this before, and sometimes he'll make like sections, like security best practices, like coding best practices, all of those sorts of things. So let's see what we get today.
Is that the when it says comprehensive, is that like all those sections, or what is that? Or we'll
that's
wait.
What I would have. Yes, that's what we get this time. So I think this is fun because you get a slightly different output every time, non-deterministic, blah blah blah. Oops, let me push this over. So I think this is great. Look, code style and standards, consistent, like very common things that you should do. Line length, I think of like, what is it, PyTest or something, or linting and all of those sorts of things where you just want your code to look nice. Different JavaScript and React rules that we have here. I always prefer Python for my Lambdas. That's also another rule that I tell it oftentimes. And here's some best practices that they're recommending for those. Architecture, front end, back end. Let's follow best practices. API design. So this is pretty good. I would add a few more DevOpsy things, but oh wait, here we go. Use linters and tests before merging code, automate deployments, all of these sort of things. This is another one that I love. Keep my README up to date. Sometimes I implement something and I forget to go back and do it. So that's helpful. Yeah. And they're just best practices. I didn't give it any indications whatsoever. But I'm going to say, yeah, you can go ahead and write that. I might go back and make some changes. Sometimes you'll run into where Q will make the same, like, I'm going to call it a mistake, but it's not really a mistake. But it'll do something that you didn't want it to do necessarily. I've had to fight with it on CORS issues because our buckets can't be public, and then you have to do the CORS stuff and CloudFront and blah, blah, blah. And so after about the third time I had to tell it to straighten that out, I made that a rule. So that's another one that I always keep. One that it recommended to me a different time, this is a small little side note, is that it also said something about making all of the front end code accessible. So another one of my side projects is working on WCAG, website content accessibility guidelines, and making sure that code is following those guidelines. It's another thing that a customer has asked for. There's new guidelines going out, or regulations actually, in Europe. And so it's becoming more and more important. And so I asked it to create a rules file for me a different time. It wasn't my accessibility project, but it still put the thing about make sure that your UI is accessible. So
nice.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking sort of out loud, like, I'm imagining, like, let's say you had some standards within your organization, like we always do this, or, this is just something security team requires, et cetera. Like, I'm imagining you could add that in here, just to ensure that's happening.
Exactly. So the customizations is super powerful, and you can set your other like coding best practices and things like that. You can define those here in the rules file as well. So yeah. So those are a couple of my favorite things. I would say that we have one more demo to show you. It's a recorded demo, so I'm going to pull that up in just 1 second. But I also want to point out that there have been so many features launched. Like last month alone, you could check out this blog. It was 10-ish or something like that. Were you able to keep up with all of the new things that have been launched? It's not your day job, but I bet you've seen a few maybe.
At this point, I would say, like, because I have not been able to keep up with some of the newer things. Like you said, it's not my day job, but I need to go back in there more often. Maybe I need to get an LLM to summarize it for me and tell me what's going on.
That's one of the other things that I'm working on, is a daily digest, almost like just something to keep coming to my inbox so I can stay up to date with all of these blog announcements and even watch the GitHub repo, because it is my day job and it is hard to stay up to date and know all the right places to look. So I'll share that with you once I get it working. So
yeah, please. Anything in my life to make things easier.
Exactly. And you can use Q to make so much of your like day job sort of life easier. One of the
Yeah.
announcements that's gotten a lot of attention lately, because it's a really hot topic, is around the MCP, Model Context Protocol. So you can go learn more about it right here. But we just added MCP support to the CLI. That went out Tuesday, I think. So I think that's the most recent announcement. I don't know, my daily digester doesn't work quite yet, but I think Tuesday was the most recent announcement that we had. So we are announcing things just all the time, lots of new things coming as we go through this. And oh, am I sharing my screen?
Like one of the cool ones too is like the natural languages in different spoken languages. The fact that
Yeah.
not programming languages, but like things that I'm speaking now, we support a bunch of different ones, which is awesome.
Yeah, that came out a couple of weeks ago or something like that. And so many of the spoken languages, of course, there's like hundreds, but I think there are many of them now that we support, where you can just naturally type or type in, and Q can kind of understand you. So the next last little thing that I want to show is a demo that my friend Marcilio did. He did this for me just earlier this week, and he actually built something using Amazon Q CLI with MCP. So we're going to roll that video for you now. And if you have comments, suggestions, anything else, drop those in the chat. And with that, I'm going to push the button and I'll take Jane and me off the screen for a minute.
Hello, everyone. My name is Marcilio. I'm a senior solution architect here at AWS. I'm part of the PACE team. It's prototyping and custom engineering. And as part of my job, I need to write a lot of code. And I'm using Q Developer, and my productivity is way, way better now.
Today we're here to talk about another new announcement. So today we're going to be talking about MCP, which is getting a lot of buzz lately. Probably a lot of you have heard of this, but there may still be some questions about what it actually is. So one of the ways that I've seen this kind of described is here in the introduction doc. So MCP stands for Model Context Protocol. First of all, important thing to know. And the analogy that I saw that kind of clicked in my head was it's kind of like USB-C. So before USB-C, every device had its own different connector. We had micro USBs and mini USBs and lightning cables and all kinds of bespoke things. But now we have the USB-C connector. So that's been really nice so that we just have the one thing. And MCP is similar in that way because MCP allows you to have a standardized way to connect to different AI models with different data sources and different tools. So that's kind of the analogy that we've got there. It's just kind of a standardized way for you to connect to different tools and data sources. And now we have MCP available within Amazon Q CLI. So we're really excited about this. Yay. And Marcilio is actually here to show us a thing that he built. So if you don't mind, why don't you talk a little bit about the project, why you did it, how you did it, and walk us through a little demo.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. So I hope you can see my screen now. So this project is called Merge Minder. So the idea here was I wanna give developers the opportunity to catch conflicts. Let's say we have multiple people working in a project in the same repository. They all have their own clones of the repo. And what they might eventually be doing is they might be changing the same files, which we all know eventually is going to lead to potentially to conflicts. And then someone is going to pull and then say, oh, I got a conflict. Now I have to resolve this conflict. And depending on which files were changed, resolving conflicts can be very painful, right? So the idea of this MCP server called Merge Minder was to give in real time updates to the developers on who is doing what in the code base. And the nice thing is that you don't even need to leave the IDE. So you just get that integrated into the QCLI, right? So the Merge Minder MCP server is this guy over here, right? So it has a couple of tools. As you can see, I can initialize the tool. I can check if there are conflicts. I can force upload of files, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a couple of of tools that were built. And as you can see, there's a lot of code here. So the cool thing was 90% of the code that you see here was auto-generated by QCLI itself. So I just gave a prompt and I said, hey, I need to build an MCP server. And I put a couple of instructions, right? And then I gave this file here as a sample. So this was kind of my seed to the QCLI. And I said, hey, use the sample server.py because I wanted to use fast MCP. I wanted to have these annotations here. And most importantly, I wanted to have the stdio transport at the bottom. And as you can see, there's a lot of code here, classes, right? Git monitor. So this is monitoring my folder. This is the to manage files, copy files around. Conflict detector to detect conflicts. And there is this S3 as well here that uploads files to S3. So the idea is that, let's say Susan and John are working on a local copy of the repo. And what they can do is, as they are making changes to the file, the server is monitoring, taking those files, uploading. When they're changed, they are uploaded to S3. And then the tool is able to know who changed what, and then now you can ask questions about that to the MCP server. So let me give you, I just wanted to show you initially the server, so you can see it's a lot of code. And at the same time, I only wrote maybe 10% of this server. Everything else was created by the QCLI, which is amazing productivity. So if I can give a demo here, so so this is the MergeMinder MCP server at the top. Here, I just want to show two clones of the same repo. So I have John over here that has a calculator.py. So this is John. And at the bottom here, I have Susan with the same calculator. So they're both, there's no conflict so far. They're working on here. On the right side here of the terminal, let's say John is going to use the QCLI. So it starts QChat. And you can see that, two MCP servers were initialized. So if I look at tools, you can see that MergeMinder is there, right? So it can download files, get the status, etc. So it's there. And Susan is going to do the same, use the QChat. And now each of them have the MCP server, the MergeMinder, connected to the CLI, seamless, like they're on the IDE. So while they're using the QCLI, now they have this extra functionality. So it's extending the CLI with this new functionality. So in order to use the tool, the first thing they're going to do is initialize MergeMinder, right? And then this is John. Susan is going to do the same thing. Initialize the MergeMinder tool. So let's see what the QCLI is going to do. So it's going to say, okay, I can initialize. So it recognizes the MergeMinder as an MCP server already. And it says, I need the path for the repository. So what do you need me to monitor for changes? It has an S3 bucket that it needs to know. And what's your name? What's the developer name? So here I can say, my name is John. The S3 folder is MergeMinder 2025. So this is an S3 bucket I created in my account. And I can say something like the repository is in the current folder. So you don't even need to actually give the folder a specific name. You can just say it's the current folder. So same for Susan. So you can see here that now it got the arguments and it's ready to initialize. So I'm going to say, I trust you. And then it's going to initialize the tool, right? Same for Susan here. Susan can say, my name is Susan. Repo is in the current directory. And S3 bucket is MergeMinder 2025. So same idea, because if they both point to the same S3 bucket, then they're both now sharing whatever changes they're making with each other. So I'm going to trust, again, the QCLI. And now both of them, so this one, the service is now running and will monitor your repository for changes, right? The same thing for Susan. Cool. So now let's go let's go start working. So in theory, I mean, right now I have these 2 folders sitting in my computer, but in practice, this would be John has like on his own laptop making changes, and Susan on her own laptop making her changes. So, all right, so this is John. Let's say John wants to make a change to the calculator. So let's say John wants to add a multiply. And you can already see that the Q developer is auto-completing the code. So that's amazing, right? You just go here, it auto-completes. So John made a change to the calculator. Now Susan, let's say Susan also makes a change here. Let's say she wants to do a subtract method. So cool. So the first thing I think is cool is like, if you look at the logs here, this merge minder log, you can see what the MCP server is doing. Right? So at the bottom here, you can see that it initialized the tool, and then it started monitoring. It detected one change. This is for John, and it uploaded that change, the calculated.py to S3. Same thing for Susan.
So it didn't even have to, you don't have to save anything. It knows that you're making the changes and then sends that to the bucket, right?
Exactly. So the merge minder is like an MCP server. It's constantly monitoring the folder. So every time you make a change, it uses a package called Git, and then it sees if this is a file that's being tracked by Git, and if so, it automatically uploads to S3. And that's what I wanted to show as well. Like if I go to S3 here, and let me refresh this folder, you can see, make it a little bigger. You can see that now there is like John and Susan in my S3 bucket. If you go John, you're going to see there's a calculator file. There's a metadata.json. And this is what keeps track of all the changes that John is making. This is just, think of this as like an index in a database, just like the files and the data that were changed. And same thing for Susan. So now let's say that Susan wants to know, is there anybody else working on the calculator.py file at the moment? So while she's working here, let's say in practice that this calculator is a massive file, right? And it's a file that most folks in the repository working on this repository make changes. So you might be concerned that there might be other people working here. So look at what is happening. So merge minder is saying, yes, there is another person working on the calculator PY. According to the repository updates, John modified this file. And then it tells you both of you have made changes to the same file recently. This means you should be careful. So now Susan's like, wow, okay, so John is working on this. Can you show me John's changes to the file? And notice that here I just say to the file. So QCLI knows I'm referring to the calculator.py because it knows the history. So now it's going to use another tool called download developer file. I'm going to say trust, right? So it downloaded the file, and now it's showing what John has done. See, so here we have this multiply that was done by John, and now Susan knows exactly what happened, right? So super cool. Now Susan is aware. If John can ask the same thing, who is currently making changes to the repository? So I can just, here in this case, John is just curious, like, what are people doing right now in the repository? Is Marcilio working in the front end? Is Marcilio working on the back end? So it's going to call another tool called check repository updates, and I can say I trust it. And then now it's going to tell John what are people doing. So it's saying, hey, Susan is working on the calculator. She made a change at this particular time at 3 minutes ago. And John's last modified by this date. There's only one file being modified. So imagine this being like a team with 6-10 developers. Now you know what everyone is doing. And it's more about collaboration than actually tracking what people are doing. It's more about, oh, John is working on this. I actually have a question. And so that's what the tool does. And as you can see, the experience is all integrated in the IDE. I don't have to leave the IDE.
That's awesome. And how long did it take you and Q to write this?
So it took me about an hour and a half to do the whole thing. Like the MCP server, integrating it with the QCLI. So I can actually show you how The integration is super straightforward. So I just say merge Minder, and I say it's a Python program. Here I just put the absolute path, and because it's a server that's continuously running, I put asynchronous equals true.
Yeah.
So it would definitely take me maybe a day or two if I had to do this manually, right? Testing, making sure, going to websites, searching for like documentation. How do I implement this? How do I implement that? Right?
You are an experienced developer. Like, you've been doing this for a few years, and it would take you a day and a half or so. So I think that also speaks volumes.
Exactly. And I'm using the CLI like in a daily basis. So I'm working on a prototype right now. So I did the backend. It was quite complex with multiple threads running. And eventually I found out that there was a race condition. So my threads were not working as expected. And I asked the CLI to generate a visualization, and it showed me a super nice visualization, and I could see right away like things overlapping. So I found the cause of the race condition, and I fixed it. So even though the CLI did not fix it for me, it gave me a visualization, and then I looked at it and I'm like, oh, okay, I got it. And then I went back to the code and I fixed it, right?
Yeah.
And it just completely changed the way we work, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great. Very cool. Well, thanks so much for being on the show today. I think this has been super powerful, very cool demo of using MCP, and kind of bringing it back to that whole analogy. Now you can kind of see how Marcilio, yesterday or the day before, used an MCP server to connect with different development tools to come up with things to help developers be more productive and collaborative across their team. As any of our viewers are kind of getting started with your own AI-powered development setup, here, if I haven't already shared this link, here is a link for you to go and get started with the Q Developer CLI. Thanks again, Marcilio, for being here, and hopefully all of our viewers come back for our show next week. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks so much. Bye.
All right. Pretty cool, right? Another demo.
It's amazing, though. An hour and a half it took him to develop that. Just unreal.
Hit that home for a minute and imagine what that would be like if you were trying to actually integrate with the Git package or service or whatever it is, like without MCP. So crazy. So, yeah, awesome. Well, I think that this is one of our longer episodes, actually, but we had so much to talk about. There's so much cool stuff with Amazon Q. Really appreciate you being here and doing this for your first live show. It's kind of pretty brave. So.
Well, thanks for having me. This has been fun. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So to all of our viewers out there, I hope you enjoyed. If you have any suggestions, comments, anything else, you can follow me, message me on LinkedIn. I'm going to say you can do the same for Jane too. You can also email us directly, the She Builds team at shebuildsna@amazon.com if you have ideas for new episodes or anything like that. I hope you learned something today. I did. Well, I learned a little bit because I did prepare for this, but I'm learning every single day. So again, thanks, Jane, for being here. And to all of our viewers, please like and subscribe to the AWS She Builds YouTube channel. It's right there. Maybe you're watching it there right now. And I think that's all. Any last words from you, Jane?
I'm just going to say, like, go ahead and use your imagination. Go and play with it. See what you can build. I think the more you do that, the more you'll see what you can do.
Agreed. That's awesome. Great parting words. Good advice. All right. Well, again, thanks, Jane. Thanks to all of our viewers, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.
Bye.